So the New to Practice Nursing Fellowship, it is a 2-year programme designed for new to practice or newly qualified nurses in order to get all of their funding sorted to become a fully fledged GPN. So meet the team. So that's me on the right. So my name's Georgia. I'm the New to Practice Ambassador. So I support all of the fellowship nurses on the fellowship during those 2 years, whether it would be for training queries or just ongoing support. I'm a practice nurse myself as well, so I have that background in order to support the nurses. We've got Amy with us as well. So Amy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep, hello, I'm Amy, the Project Support Officer for General Practice Task Force. I have obviously come from a little bit of experience working in a GP surgery. I worked there for 7.5 years, but as a reception manager, not a nurse. So welcome.
Fabulous, thanks Amy. And then we've got Laura as well. So Laura couldn't be with us today, but she is the programme manager. So any questions about funding is best directed towards Laura. So let me know and then we can just send over any questions, but we can answer what we can. So the fellowship programme itself then, so it's 2 years long. So in the first year, that's when we would signpost the nurses to access all of the training needed to become a fully fledged GPN. So this can be done through either the De Montfort University course route or the CPD route, but I'll touch on that in a second. We also have monthly peer support sessions. So this is sometimes done by Teams or sometimes face-to-face. And we have a guest speaker that comes in to deliver a session on certain topics. So last week we had a session on menopause that the nurses seemed to really enjoy. Prior to that, we had a diabetes session, COPD before that, asthma. We've done a wound care session as well before that was CPD accredited. And it's just a really, really great opportunity for all of the newly qualified or new to practice nurses just to network with their peers and know they're not alone in their training. They're in the same boat as others. We also have coaching and mentorship sessions done by an external company called GPS, but I'll go through that in a second as well. And we have initial, quarterly and end of year reviews carried out by me with the fellowship nurse just to see how they're getting on so I can progress their training so far and see if they've got any questions or concerns. Go from there. So ongoing support from the DPTF team. So at any point during the fellowship, we're there for them. In year 2, so after they've done all of their basic training needed to become a GPN, so we would recommend all their treatment room nurse stuff, getting all of that done in that first year. In the second year, once they're feeling a little bit more confident, they're feeling ready to take the next step, that's when we would say, why not choose a specialism? So a lot of surgeries, I know that sometimes you need a respiratory nurse or sometimes you need a diabetes nurse. We would aim for all of our fellowship nurses to become well-rounded if we can. So in that first year, we would encourage them to get all of their basic training for LTC reviews done. So introduction to asthma, COPD, diabetes, just so they are able to carry out a basic assessment and basic reviews. But in their second year, if it was that you needed a respiratory nurse to take on a bit more of a leadership role, that's when we would signpost them to level 5 or level 6 modules. So that encourages them to take on that leadership role. Sometimes after doing the level 6 module, if they're feeling competent enough to do so, they've had the training, they've had some experience, they could even titrate medications under the supervision of a prescriber if they weren't a prescriber themselves. So that's something we can touch on a little bit later as well. They also have the opportunity to train as a mentor to year 1 fellowship nurses as well. So that's something that would develop their own professional portfolio, which is something we really do encourage with the GPNs, because GPs, they tend to get a lot of encouragement with their professional portfolios, but not so much GPNs. So that's something we're trying to change at the Training Hub. We also have the opportunity for the fellowship nurses to develop a service improvement project. So they could do this either through DMU or through CPD route or through the CARE programme, which you might have had emails about in the past, but we'll go through that later as well. We'll carry on with their initial quarterly and end of year reviews in year 2 as well. And again, continued support and access to monthly peer sessions and meetings with me at any point. So going into the back to year 1, so where we've got here access of training sessions via DMU or CPD. So there's 2 routes the nurses can go down. So they can go down the DMU route. So the De Montfort University Practice Nursing Postgraduate Certificate Programme, which I'm sure you've all heard of. And this was one of the most popular routes, one of the only routes really that newly qualified or new to practice nurses were taking originally. So it's usually delivered, not always within the first 9 months, but it's delivered within 9 months of that first year of the fellowship that they join on to. So it will cover all of the basics. So it will get the IMS and VACs done, bloods, wound care, introduction to basic long-term condition reviews. It also covers the NEPSEC cervical cytology as well. So they'll get everything they need to get signed off in those 9 months. However, they are still on the fellowship for the 2 years. So even though they will have finished the 9-month course, afterwards they would still be expected to join the peer calls. They've still got access to further training, choice of specialism if they did want to develop in their specialty conditions. So lots of things still to take out of the fellowship over those 2 years. The CPD route is a little bit different. So with the DMU route, you do the academic writing so you can get the postgraduate certificate. So it takes up a little bit of time. They usually have to attend the university 1 day a week as well during those 9 months. But the CPD route is a little bit more flexible. So it's for the nurse and their employer to pick and choose the courses they need across the whole 24-month programme. So say, for example, if we had a district nurse coming in and she'd already done her bloods, wound care, she'd done even maybe sexual health training, something like that. So she didn't need that many courses that were offered on the DMU route. The CPD route might be a good option for them. So that is including absolutely everything really. So we have a training calendar that we can go through during the initial meeting with the nurse. I can help them book onto all of the courses to make sure they're getting booked onto them, because it is a lot of responsibility on the nurse and the employer to book them themselves, rather than with the DMU course where the dates are booked, the training dates are there and scheduled already just for them to go on to. So this does take a bit of responsibility as well, using the CPD route. It's also, we also provide the cervical cytology training with NEPSEC as well. So whether they go through the DMU or CPD route, it will always be NEPSEC. So this is a bit of an example with DMU training days and the CPD training days. So this is, I think it was 2022's timetable, but it's pretty much stayed the same. So it's usually every Thursday for 9 months. So they'll do a 2-day session on IMS and VACs, ear care and bloods. There's the NEPSEC course here for cervical cytology. You've got a day course on asthma, cardiovascular disease, etc., contraception and sexual health, and all of that is covered within those 9 months. For the CPD route, we've developed a little bit of a checklist just for the nurse to go through and check off as they go, just to make sure they're getting all of it done. It's not all mandatory, of course. So here at the bottom, learning disabilities and heart failure introduction. This is something we recommend if the nurse has time to do it and wants to do it, but it's not as mandatory as getting your smears done, as your contraception done, IMS and VACs done, all of that. So at the moment as well, we are in the works of developing a competency booklet for the CPD nurses. So with the DMU nurses, they do have a competency booklet they can go through with their mentor to make sure they're signed off for everything. But the CPD nurses don't currently have that. So we are changing that to provide a little bit more structure for them, and just a record of getting things signed off. So that's something we'll hope to introduce by the end of the year. So as I touched on before, then I will pop out of my presentation just to show you the leaflets that we've got. So in the second year, then, if it is that you want your nurse to specialise in diabetes, for example, these are our flyers where we can signpost them to further courses. So we've got level 5 or we've got level 6, and we can signpost them to diabetes, CVD, COPD, and we also offer funding for long-acting reversible contraception as well. So if you had a nurse that was really interested in pursuing women's health, wanted to train in inserting coils or implants, that's something we can provide funding for as well. So next then, so monthly peer calls or monthly peer sessions, as we're trying to call them recently, because they're not always calls, sometimes they are face-to-face. So this is the timetable that we gave out at the start of this year. So sometimes it is subject to change, but we always make sure that we send an updated timetable well in advance, and we usually give a copy of this to the nurse during their initial meeting with myself, just so we can give it to the nurse leads, practice managers, reception managers, whoever usually signs the nurses off for or blocks their clinic off, so they're able to attend these sessions. We also have WhatsApp groups for networking, to build those relationships, professional relationships, and the GP and Derbyshire Nurse network group as well, just to have a bit of support there. So going back over the reviews then. So with me, the Nurse Ambassador, so I will carry out initial 6-month, end of year and 18-month reviews with the nurses. So I usually set up either a Teams meeting or a face-to-face meeting. I usually leave it up to the nurse which they would prefer, where we will go over all of the training needs that they require to become a practice nurse. We'll go over what they've learned so far, what training they already have, so we don't go over it again. And it's basically just a chance for them to get to know me, for me to get to know them, talk about the networking sessions, talk about any upcoming training events. And then at 6 months, we send in a check-in form to the nurses just to see how they're getting on, if they've got any questions so far, any concerns that they'd like me to answer, if they want me to come for a meeting, if they want me to supervise any skills that they need signing off, if they don't have a mentor available at the surgery, that's something we can provide. And then we do an end of year 1 meeting. This is usually as well when we start talking about a service improvement project, which I will go into more depth in a second. And then 18 months, so that's just, they're coming to the end of their fellowship, how are they getting on? Is there any last minute things they want to book onto before the fellowship ends? So coaching and mentorship, I did talk about this very briefly earlier. So it is with an external company called GPS, and they usually provide coaching, usually from GPs or people that have worked in primary care before. And it's not so much mentorship with GPN skills. It's not really talking to them about competency sign-off or anything like that. It's more professional development and working within the MDT. So if you've got a brand new nurse that's never stepped foot in primary care before, doesn't really understand any of the roles or QOF or anything like that, this is designed to support them that way. So we really encourage the nurses to book onto this as well. So going on to the service improvement project. So the service improvement project, it's the opportunity for the nurse to identify within practice an improvement or a change that is needed. So they could identify this themselves, they could identify this within their teams, or they could identify this with yourselves as practice managers or nurse leads. And for the DMU route, they are required to do this. I think I mentioned that earlier. So they do have to do the service improvement project. However, with the CPD route, it's not mandatory, but again, we really do like to encourage it because of the development with their professional portfolio. So this is something they can do via us, or we can even incorporate the care programme into that as well. So some examples include, we've got a nurse at the moment looking into attendance rates for cervical screening. So at the moment it's 70%. So after she's actioned it, we're hoping to see a bit of an improvement in that score. Recall rates for HbA1c checks in those with gestational diabetes, lots of really interesting things. And we also at the end of the fellowship have a celebration event. So we're having our first ever one this year, which we hope you've received an email for, and if not, we would really love for you to attend, just so you can see what the fellowship is itself. It's for GPNs and GPs. And Amy, if you wanted to touch on this a little bit more as well, we're having a bit of an awards ceremony, having a prize for the best service improvement project, but I'll let Amy talk a bit more about that if you can jump in there, Amy.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So yeah, we've got a New to Practice celebration event happening in November, and it's aimed at GPs and general practice nurses, as well as some Trailblazer fellows that have done some recent improvements in primary care for colleagues. So they'll be there as well to demonstrate what they've achieved in the 12-month fellowship, which is slightly different to the New to Practice. Obviously all the support and mechanisms are all the same. We'll touch on funding. We'll also have the Joined Up Care Wellbeing team there as well to deliver some top tips on keeping you up to date with your mental health and prioritising yourself as well as patients. So it's all round, I think, going to be a lovely evening. Yeah, it's set to be really nice, and it's a chance for everyone to network. And I think the aim overall is to encourage GPs and nurses, especially newly qualified, to work a bit more closely together and share their experiences and even come up with some improvement projects together, which I think will encourage practices to become more holistic, and it will also improve staff retention as well. So
yeah, absolutely, definitely. So if you haven't received the invite already, do let us know and we can forward it out to you, because it would be really great to see you all there and just network with all the surgeries in Derbyshire. Yeah, going back to it then, so service improvement projects, we will be hopefully having a bit of a showcase of them. So we're encouraging the nurses to just present theirs as well, because they could be up for a prize. So I'm going to move on to Sophie now, who did the CPD route, and she's going to provide some feedback on how she's found it so far and answer any questions you have. So Sophie, if you could jump in and explain how you found the fellowship so far.
Hello. So I joined my practice about 1.5 years ago now, and I went straight from newly qualifying. It's been brilliant, to be honest. I mean, initially, I won't lie, I used it as like an incentive for an employer to hire me, because I thought, you know, it is a great help if you're a small surgery. You know, we aren't the biggest of surgeries, and funding is quite a lot, and I think I found it quite a barrier when I was looking for a job. You know, you've been put forward with a newly qualified nurse, or even, you know, a nurse that's had 10 years experience somewhere else. It's completely different when you've got to come and go and do all of these new courses, and it costs so much money. So I used it as a bit of an incentive, you know, well, health education will help pay for my courses, and it's not going to come out of the practice pocket. And I think once I sort of started mentioning that, the doors did open, and there were a lot more sort of feedback and interest on my CV and things like that. But I think, and then even then, when I initially started at the surgery, I didn't really use health education as much as I should have. I think if you do take on nurses under this fellowship, I would try and encourage them to probably use it a bit more than I did. It was just a case of, oh, I'm interested in this course, you know, could you signpost me, which is really helpful. I would just ask if, you know, can someone find me such and such a course, and it would be like, yeah, we found you this one on this date, it costs this much, and we'll happily, you know, supply the funding. But I didn't really use it as well as I should, you know, the networking between the peers and things like that, so you get to know everybody and ask the questions. And now it does seem a lot better. I think the attendance is a lot better as well in the monthly peer calls, and when we meet up, if we meet face to face. So it's nice to see everybody again, and sort of like talk about what we're all getting up to. I chose the CPD route just because it fit within my practice. We had a nurse retiring, which meant we only had 3 left, and they really needed someone to come in and fill in the hours. So relinquishing me for a day a week just wasn't going to be very practical for the surgery. And I found it really helpful working hands-on. So, you know, a lot of practice is see one, do one, teach one. And initially, when you have that time, when you come in, I feel like you do have a lot more time to be able to do that. And to be honest, I was just glad to get rid of university, and I couldn't think of anything worse than having to go back 1 day a week. But it's been really, really helpful having health education in the background, just to know that someone is there. I think we all get that flip when we first start, especially if you have someone coming from newly qualified. You know, it's great, you know, you've got somebody with up-to-date knowledge, you couldn't ask for anything better, and you can, you know, mold them into what you want them to be for the practice. But it's the confidence and the working on your own. So if you need that mentorship, you know that if you, as the surgery, haven't even got time really to provide it, which is fine because everybody is so busy, and you're taking on an extra member of staff because you're so busy, then you know you've got health education there to rely on to kind of pick that up and and support the nurse that you've got coming in. Yeah, I don't know if you want anything else from me, but
no, that was really great, Sophie. Really, really good. Yeah, so Sophie has done really well because you came in newly qualified, didn't you, Sophie? So came in and you've come so far already. You've done so much already, and you've become a really confident nurse, and it's been lovely for me to see that as well. So thank you.
Yeah, I do think the CPD has worked for me. It's been a lot. It has been a lot. I think you finish one training course and then you go on to the next and the next. And I did, after I think that 12-month period, I think you'd messaged me at the time about the service improvement. I was talking with my surgery about training in diabetes, and there was a lot to sort of accumulate all together, to kind of build on your confidence, so you know what you're doing day to day. But I mean, there is no rush really. It depends on what your need is within your surgeries, and I never felt any pressure. It just kind of fell that way. It just kind of was like, well, I've done this now, maybe it's time to move on to the next step. But I don't feel like, I did worry that doing the CPD would I probably wouldn't do as much as somebody that went and did the DMU course. But I mean, yeah, I'm a year and a half in now, and apart from specialising into diabetes, I do everything that everybody else does. So yeah, all right.
Yeah, I think you've done really, really well, Sophie. And like Sophie said as well, there really is no rush. We always like to promote that. So even though there's plenty of opportunities, plenty of training courses and educational routes you can go down, there really isn't any rush. Even after the fellowship, we're looking at mid-career developments and training opportunities at the moment for GPNs. So even if we can't access everything in those 2 years, it's fine. At least we've got a bridge between us both, and we've got that networking there. So they know that we're there. If you or your practice nurses want to develop in something else, we can do it at any point. So the fellowship is just a fantastic way, really, to build bridges between surgeries and yeah, a network.